Well, hello, my name is Julian Treasure, and I'm delighted ASSA ABLOY have given me the opportunity to share with you some thoughts about sound and design. In fact, the talk is called Designing for the Ears. It's really very common that we think of design just with the eyes, and yet actually we design for all the senses, and that's really what this talk is about. Now let's talk about sound. This is kind of Sound 101. You may know all this stuff, but it's worth just reminding ourselves of RAT. When sound hits a surface, it'll do one of three things, and this is RAT. Reflect, it'll bounce back. If the surface is hard, particularly, it'll do that. It might get absorbed if the surface is soft, and absorbed means turned into heat energy, actually, because, of course, the energy doesn't go away. Energy is always there. And the third thing it may do is go through the surface and transmit to the other side, which is something we tend to guard against in buildings. So that's the RAT. So I'm going to look at 3 or 4 environments that we are very familiar with and start with this one. And we all spend a lot of time in these places, don't we? Sadly, the sound in these spaces is not very well designed, not very much thought of. Now, the modern office goes back to Taylorism in the early part of the 20th century, when Taylor thought, wow, what a brilliant idea to apply industrial manufacturing principles to the office. So you have everybody on identical workstations in serried ranks. Now, of course, Taylorism is long past. We wouldn't do that in the modern era, would we? Or would we? Sadly, neo-Taylorism is alive and well in the open plan office. No wonder then that noise is the #1 complaint in modern offices, in survey after survey. The biggest survey in the world is the Leesman Index. I do advise you to check it out if you haven't already found it. It's an omnibus survey which now has got tens of thousands of questionnaires. It gets over the problem of comparing apples and pears, like productivity. What's the productivity of a creative director versus the productivity of an accountant? Well, it gets over that by asking people what factors are important to you in your personal productivity, and how satisfied are you with them in your office? So that's kind of universal. And noise is very significant on that survey. You can see here, in terms of importance, nearly 3/4, well, more than 3/4 of the survey say that noise in the office is a very important factor, and less than 1/4 of them are happy with it. They find it very unsatisfactory. 3/4 of them are dissatisfied. And the same thing applies to quiet working space. It's important that it's there, and not many of them are happy that there's enough of it. Now let's move on to education. When I see a classroom that looks like this, I'm forced to ask myself this question. Now, I know you guys do have ears, of course, this is somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but when you think about the designs that you're doing, the projects that you're putting out there, have you really considered the way these spaces are going to feel to be in for the ears? Are you designing with and for the ears as much as for the eyes? Because just think of what that classroom is going to sound like filled with 20 or 30 kids who are doing group work. Not great, I would say. There is a lot of research on the effect of poor acoustics in particular in education. And of course, poor acoustics here, I'm kind of including attenuation from outside and from adjoining spaces. If noise in a classroom goes up, what happens is people find it harder to work, and it's stressful for the kids and for the teachers. Lots of research on this now. 5 decibel drop in noise contributes to reading and recall up 10%. These are significant numbers. Attention and memory up 3%. So that's a 50% drop in the noise level in the space. And this is a disturbing graph to me from, again, Shield and Dockrell. Here we have the degradation. As the space gets noisier, the reading scores go down for typical pupils, which is bad enough. But if you're talking about pupils who have got some kind of special educational needs, it's a disastrous effect. I mean, their reading scores go down to very minimal levels. So we are disadvantaging them even more than the average pupil. Let's move on to leisure and the hospitality industry, where again, noise is a significant issue. Now, I think many luxury brands these days are selling peace. I mean, peace is kind of the new time, if you like. We've been selling save time, save time, save time for a long time. Now you're tending to find, particularly luxury brands, using slogans like the quietest cabin in the sky, or talking about me time and peace and so forth. Certainly in the leisure and hospitality industry, peace is what people are starting to focus on, quality of sleep, spas, welcome, and so forth. It's the #1 complaint on this enormous survey done by Review Pro, which was 2.5 million guest reviews. What they did was they corralled all those guest reviews from the various services on the internet, and they looked at, it was nearly 6,000 hotels, 20 cities. What was the #1 thing that people were complaining about, not at the hotel, but when they got back afterwards? They said it was terrible, it was too noisy. The second thing was the elevators, and the third thing was strange smells. So those were the three that pulled out of that survey, noise the #1. Let's move on to hospitals, where you would think if we go to hospital, we're going to be treated in a beautiful, optimal environment. Sadly, no. Noise levels are rocketing in hospitals. Look at this graph. This is really disturbing. The daytime noise levels, as measured in this study, are around 72 decibels, as compared to the World Health Organization recommended maximum of 35. By 1960, it had been already up to 57 decibels, and in 2005, 72 decibels. That's daytime. Nighttime, we've got 60 dB at night against 30 dB. Now, do you remember, every increase of 10 decibels is doubling? So you might look at this graph and say, well, that's really bad. The noise levels are more than double what they should be. No, they're actually 12 times what they should be. Every 10 decibels, a doubling of the noise. And at night, 8 times what they should be, according to the World Health Organization. This is a disastrous situation. It affects the accuracy of dispensing because people can't hear instructions and their concentration is being disturbed by the noise around them. Most of all, it affects recovery because we get well by sleeping. Sleep is how we recover. And how can anybody sleep in an environment that sounds like this? These are all threat sounds. Our body is telling us, I'm in danger here. It affects both the quality and the quantity of our sleep. Sleep is compromised by noise. I am absolutely convinced that we could transform hospital and healthcare outcomes by paying attention to the sound of these spaces, and we could transform the outcomes virtually overnight. So, to summarize, we have in the past really focused on aesthetics, security, reliability, and value when we're thinking about door furniture, doors, closures, seals between rooms. I'm saying that those aren't the only factors in play. Actually, what else is in play is people's productivity, people's creativity, because it's hard to be creative when there's noise and interruptions coming from around you, well-being, happiness, and connectedness. All those things result from getting this right, getting good attenuation between spaces, designing the sound within spaces so that it's optimal. Acoustics, noise, sound system, content. These things all come from reducing noise levels. And if we pay attention to this in our design, then we do a service to the entire world. Attenuation affects everything. Blocking is absolutely essential for all types of human behavior.